Hi, I'm Holly with Stella Mari's Quilts, and today we're continuing our quilting journey through all 50 states using this book that, with permission from this publisher. The information for that is in the description box below. Also in the description box below is information about the patterns with the adaptations and step-by-step instructions that we've written. Today we are going to go ahead and work on the quilts for Iowa. So let's grab a cup of tea and let's go ahead and get started. To do the Iowa block, we're going to need one light that's 3.5 by 3.5. We're going to need 8 light strips that are 1.25 by 4 3/4. We will also need that in our dark fabric, and we'll need 4 of those. We're going to need some small light squares that are 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. We're going to need some medium squares that are 2 5/8, and then we're going to need 2 strips each of our light and our medium that are 1.5 by width of fabric. We're going to use those to make some half square triangles. Let's start with those half square triangles. So I've already sewn the strips together, so I have one light and one dark, and I sewed down both sides of the strip set so that we can cut this out as a tube. I'm going to use the Clearly Perfect slotted trimmer, and I'm going to line up their line with my stitch line, getting it as close to the selvage as I can without actually getting selvage in my cut. I'm just going to go ahead and cut across, cut down, cut my notches, and there we have our first 1.5 inch half square triangle. It's so tiny and cute, and there's 60 of these in this quilt block. So I'm going to go ahead and show that again using a different squaring tool. By cutting it this way, I can make sure that my pieces are 1.5 and I don't have to square them after I've cut. Another way I could do this is by using a ruler and lining it up so that my 1.5 mark, which is right there, touches my seam line on both sides of this square. And then I can just cut across. Oh, I shifted that. When I'm cutting this, oh, didn't quite go all the way there. When I'm cutting this, I am catching some of that second seam in the point here, but it's only like 2 stitches, so it pops open really easily. And that's what that looks like. Now, by using this square, it doesn't cut off my dog ears, but you can trim those off with your scissors after you've pressed, or you can just take your rotary cutter and just cut an angle. And then when you open it up, those dog ears are going to disappear. The other tip, because these pieces are so small, you're going to want to make sure you're as precise as possible with your 1/4 inch seams as you're sewing them together. But pressing it back, it's not significant when you're using a larger block, but it does create a little bit of a lip, which means you're going to lose a tiny bit of your size when you press. So to keep your blocks, your little half square triangles, as perfectly 1.5 as possible before you start sewing, I found that it is best to press my seams open. Not something I typically do, but when working with little pieces, you want to keep that measurement as perfectly precise as possible any variation will just exponentially grow as you put things together. So just a tip. I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting out all of my half square triangles, and then I'll show you the layout for this piece. So here's the layout with those half square triangles. We have 5 across at the very bottom, and then 4, 3, 2, 1 working our way up. I've also then placed in here some setting triangles. These are our squares of the light that are 1 3/4 inch, and they're just cut in half diagonally from corner to corner one time. They're used to set in and make this into a giant triangle with very tiny pieces. You'll need 4 of these units, so I'm going to go ahead and sew this together along with the other 3, and then we'll move on to the next step. And here are 4 completed triangle units that will end up being in the corners of our block. So now we're going to start working on the center of the block. I'm going to take our center square, which is 3.5, and I'm going to take our medium square that is a 3 by 3. I'm going to cut this in half from corner to corner. That way we have 4 of those. And we're going to turn this into a square in a square unit. I'm just going to turn this over on this side and on this side, sew it down, then I'll open it up and repeat the process on these 2 sides. So here's our unit after I've sewn 2 of those triangles on. You can see they poke out a little bit on the edge. That's perfect because that's going to provide for our seam allowance. I'm going to go ahead and just trim off those little dog ears. And then I'm going to go ahead and press this back. I'm going to use my seam roller instead of my iron. Just enough to get a good press back. We'll press the whole block with the iron when it's done. So now that I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and add the remaining 2 triangles on the other sides. And here's that finished square in a square center part of our block. The next step we're going to do is we're going to make some strip units. For these strip units, they are going to have 2 light and 1 of our darks in the center. We're going to need 4 of those. So I'm going to go ahead and just sew together one side and then sew together the other side and be right back. Now we're going to continue laying out the center of our block. So we're going to lay these strip units along all 4 sides of that square in a square, and we're going to add squares to the corners here. So to do this assembly, we're going to sew this together as 1 row, this together as a row, this together as row, and then we'll sew all of it together, just like a 9 patch. So I've sewn some of it together already, and just wanted to share this tip with you. When I'm sewing together these side pieces, I'm actually sewing with the square and a square up, and that's so that I can actually watch where my seams intersect right here, and I can stitch just on the other side of that point, and that's going to help keep all of my points when we flip it over to the front. So I've done that on all 3 of these sides that have already been sewn. I'm just going to do that on my last side here, press it, and then we'll be right back. Our last step is to take this center unit and turn it on point, and we're going to set it with those half square triangle units that we did at the very start. So I'm going to go ahead and take this to the sewing machine to 2 sides here, sew them down. I'm going to watch my points as I come across here,
and then I'll flip those back and repeat with the remaining 2 sides.
And this is the finished Iowa block. Thank you for joining me today working on this beautiful block for the state of Iowa with all of its tiny piecing. Just a few tips with the small piecing. It's not harder, it's just smaller. And if you shorten your stitch lengths just a little bit, it helps those small pieces not come undone so easily as you're working with them. Take your time, have patience, and you're gonna have a beautiful block in the end. I hope you enjoyed this and you join us next time. Until then, cheers and happy quilting.